Today's chat is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/FFC. With over 180,000 titles to choose from your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player, this is a great alternative for keeping up with the monthly Focused Fire Book Club.
Welcome to Focused Fire Chat. Explore together.
Welcome back for episode 113 of Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on December 22nd, 2017, over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Big shout out to the live chat here. Thank you so much for joining us for another evening back in the farm tonight. This is your host, Blue Crew 86. Alongside me, we have the man who has been said to have the voice of a flower. Well, I guess you're the Rat King still, aren't you?
Yeah, I haven't changed that yet. Okay. Because it's hard to do on a phone.
You have a computer now, though, don't you?
I know.
And that leads me to my next question is, how is your tech working for you tonight?
Oh, I'm making it work for me tonight. I'm the boss. Oh, crap. Everything's going to fall apart now. It's over. No, I'm doing great.
On standby. It's fine.
Yeah, Pins is here. But yeah, doing awesome. Great to be here. Can't wait to talk about AI.
AI.
Allen Iverson, right?
Yeah,
basketball
obviously.
No.
Yeah. Sports ball,
basketball,
right? Isn't that what we're talking about?
We're talking sports ball tonight, guys. Slight deviation.
Justin's going to take the lead. And he's going to pretend he knows what he's saying.
Well, you also hear over there our favorite Gunter, the one and only Green-Eyed Music Lover. Green, how are you doing tonight?
I am great. I've got a cold brew coffee nitro, a French press. I've been up since 5 and worked for 10 hours, so I'm good.
And we did just get...
I'm good.
Awesome. We did just get notice from Beard. He is actually running a little bit behind, but he's going to jump in as soon as he can. So you'll hear him join in hopefully later in the episode. Suddenly, we'll try to warn everybody before he jumps in. And then also right before we run through our intro or our topics notes, I wanted to take a chance and kind of wish everyone a happy holidays, regardless of what you're celebrating. It's always a good time to spend with family, get the presents hopefully that you're looking for. I know my 4-year-old is going to clean out everybody, so I hope you guys get as lucky as he is getting, because he got all the toys.
Considering you had a whole room devoted to the stuff he was getting that you had to go and wrap later.
Yeah, it was a little ridiculous. Like, we've been getting packages from family. Like, as he gets bigger, the presents, of course, get bigger. And I'm like, I don't know. And like, now we're getting requests. Like, oh, well, we're going to come up and visit. Can you hide it from him? I'm like, I can try.
I mean, I miss the good old days when their kids were like a cat, and you got them a present, and they were more interested in the box.
Yeah, we did have a couple of years of that. I actually have a video of him playing with a box that we were trying to get him to play with the toy that was in the box. No, he was more interested in the Amazon box than he was in the toy. We do have actually a video of that.
Or you have you play with the wrapping paper tube, and it's a bow staff when you start, and then after a little while, it's nunchucks. That's the best. That's my favorite.
Or a lightsaber, and then mom gets mad, and it turns into trash.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I know I'm looking forward to diving into the discussion as well as the team here. So let's run through our standard intro notes and then get right into it. Our topic for this week's chat is going to be a look at the dangers of artificial intelligence within Destiny. Before we jump into that, however, I do have a few housekeeping notes to run through. In our last chat, we discussed Osiris. If you ever miss an episode and would like to catch up, please be sure to check out the new FocusFireChat.com for archives, articles, and links to the other aspects of Focus Fire Chat. If you don't mind, please give us some feedback on iTunes to let us know how we're doing, as well as helping us continue to grow. As many of you already know, Focus Fire Chat is a cross-community gathering where the intent is to offer a week-long, in-depth view of a particular subject from within the lore of Destiny and other games. This chat begins every Tuesday morning and runs until the following Tuesday, with topics decided by the group via a poll that begins every Friday and ends on the Tuesday morning of the new chat. Every Friday at about 10 p.m. Central, we get together to stream a recap of the previous week's chat for those who are unable to participate. Please be sure to also give some support to the other podcasts in the Guardian Radio Network, links of which can be found on our show notes or on our website. Podcasts focused on Destiny include Guardian Radio, the first and longest running Destiny podcast on the net, Guardian 1, a Destiny group dedicated to Guardians helping Guardians and discussing current Destiny news and happenings, Ghosts and Echoes, which is a collection of the Destiny audio grimoire from Destiny 1, and the network's newest edition, This Guardian Life, a podcast from the casual Guardian's perspective and highlighting all Guardians, large and small. We do also have a non-Destiny focused podcast, The Enthusiast Life, which is a podcast that discusses a wide range of fun topics from within the entertainment world. Our next chat is going to be a discussion on the Books of Sorrow. Be sure to weigh in on the poll this weekend to let us know which topic you'd like to discuss after that. Links to that poll can be found on either Twitter at FocusFireChat or within our Discord server. Before we jump into the information and thoughts the community had about artificial intelligence, however, let's look at this week's Lost Lore. All right, so this week's Lost Lore, I think we were going to take the chance and kind of talk about, what we know as the Warmind of Mars, which is basically the only name that we get attributed to that character in Destiny 1 in-game. Now, we do have some nods to that figure from Deej, back before Destiny came out, and that was when they referred to a entity on Mars known as Charlemagne, which is where a lot of the, I want to say speculation, but it's more of an assumption that Warmind on Mars is Charlemagne. And kind of the hope of a lot of people, and I saw this actually in chat today, actually. We were chatting about the potential of the next DLC being Charlemagne rising up against Rasputin. Kind of a battle, what would you call that?
A Warmind showdown?
The Clash of the Titans, if you would.
All of the Warsats falling and destroying Mars. That's what I call it.
Yeah.
I would call that Ragnarok, is what I would call it.
Yeah, there's another word for it, and I'm just completely
Reckoning.
No, it's
end times.
It's coming?
the Greek mythology, Titanomachy.
Yeah, I don't think I would have gotten that.
Sorry, well, the reason why I say that is because that's very similar to Ragnarok. But I mean, obviously, it's instead of Ragnarok's the end, Titanomachy is kind of one of the beginnings between the Olympians and the Titans. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be, like Black Flag in chat, a war of the minds. And I just think that would be a really cool, I think that'd be a really cool way to kind of reintroduce Rasputin into Destiny 2. Because up until now, really, Rasputin especially, he was a big figure in Destiny 1. And then in Destiny 2...
He's still a hinted at big figure.
Oh, well, I guess that's true.
He's not central in the story at the moment, but he's still on the edges and still incredibly powerful.
Right, and I guess my point there was, like, the entire Red War, Rasputin didn't seem to do anything.
Well, we know that as far as an explanation for that, we know that the satellites went out. Like, there are no satellites.
His eyes out.
That's true.
So that may be a reason why he didn't respond. We also know that there's I want to say a scannable on Io where it says, or it may be just part of the mission, where it says that Rasputin is stranded on Earth.
Yeah, that was part of the Arecibo mission or adventure.
Right.
Because that was where the really confusing Rasputin is the only Warmind left comment is also made.
Right.
So,
which would be interesting. Do we have any? I don't remember if there's any instances. I know we have a few mentions about Mars in D2, but not much. More has to do with the Cabal.
Other than again in Arecibo, the I guess the secret ending that I wasn't aware was a secret ending, where Rasputin or whichever Warmind we're interacting with at the time, wipes ghost memories. There's the multiple kind of weird comments about the red planet and the ice caps.
Right.
But I mean, and I guess, and that's really kind of the other thing with the question of the Warmind of Mars is like, is this actually a separate entity from Rasputin? Is it just another submind or just an asset of his that he has reclaimed or that he has yet to reclaim? How exactly does that work? I do point out, and I have pointed out this a couple times, that in the Golden Age, they were explained as planetary Warminds, which to me gives the impression that there was at least one Warmind per planet.
Right. Which
now,
a lot of people tend to believe, but when we released Rasputin on everybody, didn't he take him over?
Right, and that's the question: is do these other Warminds, are they simply still slumbering, waiting activation, and Rasputin just bypassed the activation to take their assets for himself?
But doesn't one of the Rasputin cards refer to him as first among equals?
Yes, yeah. So and that's where he gets the nickname Tyrant, or that's where we learned of his nickname.
From my
if you actually look at the symbol for a Warmind is just it's the little rhombus with the bars, but the Rasputin symbol has the little wings coming off of it, which
and we've had
to me
yeah.
It just seems like in the symbology of it, he's the chief Warmind.
Right, he's the first among equals. The other minds, the other AI forms referred to him as the Tyrant. He's apparently very grumpy.
Yes, fun story. Charlemagne does not show up in any grimoire from D1.
No, Charlemagne does not show up in grimoire at all. Martel does, though.
Yes.
Which is where so Charlemagne, and that's where it kind of gets into more of this being an assumption than kind of a conclusion, is because the only real big mention of Charlemagne is actually from out of game from Deej, and I believe it was the Ides of Mail, or the mail sack, basically, before they had This Week at Bungie. They would do things like basically respond to questions and all that for their blog posts. And in 2013, I believe it was March, it might have been May of 2013, Deej made a comment about how one of the things that we might be seeing in Destiny is a reclamation of Charlemagne, or helping Charlemagne on Mars. And then you saw within Destiny 1, I think it was Vanilla, the ghost fragment for Titan is Holborn's host on Mars, and Holborn was a Titan or a Titan commander whose host was predominantly stationed on the Martian area. And so, but one of his big things in the Ghost Fragment Titan is they were actually on their way to the Dust Palace to explore and to assist in kind of helping with what was believed to be a Warmind. That was when they ran into the little ghost that they spent that card talking to. That was what they were doing. They were gearing up, actually getting ready to go support a few other Guardians in their mission at the Dust Palace. And then you also see within there's I think it's a Ghost Fragment Rasputin, the one with Cade. That it actually got rehashed in Destiny 2 as part of one of the Hunter subclass missions, and completely changed the way that I read the card, at least, because the way they read the card with the voice actor really flips how the message is delivered. Because in Destiny 1, when we read it, I was thinking that it was kind of like the Scions talking to the Warmind. And when you hear Nathan Fillion read it as Cade in the subclass mission, it actually sounds more like it's Cade, like an Exo speaking to Rasputin. And kind of like the question of loyalty and the question of, the characterization or the who is in command of whom from a war machine's point of view.
Well, I mean, that's something we're going to get into, I'm sure, a bit later, but the fact that Exos were not necessarily part of Rasputin's things, but Rasputin had frames that he was in charge of.
Platforms
is a good way to put it.
Yeah, and we definitely will get into that when we talk a little bit about the Exos, because I kind of have a theory about that, and it ties into kind of the supposed original story that Destiny was going to have with Rasputin and the Dreadnought and all that. Which actually, I think, I like the idea that was presented with that, because it made a lot of sense from a Warmind perspective as a commander. But we'll definitely get into that when we talk on the Exos and their entire the entire issue with the Exos, because there's a lot of issues with Exos as far as AI is concerned. But yeah, so I mean, what are your guys's thoughts on the whole Warmind of Mars? Do you guys think that is a separate entity? Do you think it's just a part of Rasputin at this point? Like, do you think we'll see that go anywhere in the DLC that we know is going to be about Warminds?
Justin, do you want to go first?
Yeah. I think we'll probably see this sussed out some. I think it's going to be Charlemagne. I don't know if we're going to see the War of the Minds, but I think Charlemagne will have a part to play, and we will get to find out the specifics of the war of the Warmind that's on Mars.
Green, what about you?
I'm trying to figure. Like, I'd like to. I have more of what I'd like to see rather than what I think is going to happen. I'd like to see Charlemagne be kind of an antagonist in some way, shape, or form. Whether he's against Rasputin in general, and Rasputin kind of gone rogue, or just some more of a character, because right now we just have hints of him with the Scions and everything.
So would you rather have Charlemagne as an antagonist and Rasputin as the protagonist, or
yes?
So Rasputin is the good and Charlemagne's the bad. Because
I think it would be a nice twist, because everyone's expecting Rasputin to go bad and to go crazy.
Right. I was about to say, because that's actually kind of in the opposite way that a lot of people seem to think of Rasputin.
Right.
Is they kind of view Rasputin as the bad one.
And I think that would be kind of interesting to see him actually develop a more good side. My dogs are on a tear tonight, plus we're dog sitting, so if you hear them in the background, they are just having a good old time.
But okay, so that kind of is where we are with Lost Lore. As far as items that kind of touch on this like I mentioned, there's not a lot. There is the Warmind, the intact. I think it's the intact Warmind core that is codenamed Martel from Destiny 1, and that's pretty much it. But if you look at the real life connections, so going a little bit breaking fourth wall, Martel is actually the grandfather of Charlemagne. So that's where another little bit of a connection is drawn there as well. And we talked about that quite a bit in the Rasputin episode, which I think I'm trying to remember what episode that was. I know we touched on it in episode 105 with War Mines and episode 62.
Episode 14 was
14.
War Mines. Episode 20, I have them all listed in the mind map. Rasputin was 62.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So yeah, we definitely kind of explored that a little bit more in that episode. But I know, kind of speaking of Rasputin, do you want to jump just right into kind of breaking that out a little bit, or do you think we've had it? What are your thoughts on that, guys? Because I mean, Rasputin is pretty much a pillar of an example for AI in Destiny.
Well, we can use him as a framework and then kind of relate things back to him, because I have a feeling that's what's going to happen anyway, during he's the pivotal AI.
Yeah, well, one of them.
Was that a pun? Framework? I like it.
Yeah.
No?
I'm good with it. This guy sweeping
Beard's
the
not
fire
here, so.
is driving me a little crazy right now. Oh, now he's dancing with his broom.
So, and one of the cool things about, one of the big things about AI, artificial intelligence, real quick, before we jump into specific artificial intelligences within Destiny, I really do want to point out that what makes an artificial intelligence is basically an intelligence that's displayed by machines. So this is usually contrasted with what's called natural intelligence, which is displayed by humans and animals and other things like that. So in computer science terms, artificial intelligence research is defined as the study of what's called intelligent agents. And this is basically any device that perceives its environment and takes actions that maximize its chance of success at some goal. So that is when we say artificial intelligence, that's what we're talking about. Basically, it is a non-natural entity or thing that is displaying an intelligence. So, I mean, most people know what artificial intelligence is, but just in case you wanted some more clarification on what we say there, that's what that is. And that's why sometimes when you look at the characters within Destiny, things like Exo, the Exos are technically, excuse me, the Exos are technically, I would say by that definition, considered artificial intelligence. Because and this is because of the information that we have as of right now, it doesn't seem that the Exos have any organic components. We have idle dialogue from Cade from the treasure maps that actually speaks about how the bodies were left behind. He has bones, but they were left behind. So they are copies of a conscience, but they are not physical. They're not natural bodies, which that can open a very large tangent into the Ghost in the Machine and philosophical frameworks of what it means to be a natural person. And I understand that fully. I'm going to try not to go down that road, because then we'll be here for days. But that's a really good kind of a starting point for understanding what we mean when we talk about AI. Another thing to keep in mind is we're going to refer to a lot, or I'm going to refer to a lot, is something called the laws of robotics. This is, again, if you're familiar with science fiction, this is something that is very, very popular in science fiction, especially science fiction that deals with robotics, or anything with AI. And so the law of robotics is a concept that was basically coined by Isaac Asimov. And it's basically 3 laws. And the 3 laws, let me pull them up real quick to make sure that
0, 1, 2.
Well, actually, interestingly enough, the 0th law, which is
added later, wasn't it?
It was added a couple years after the 3 laws because, well, I'm going to talk about that in just a second.
We'll get into it.
Yeah. So the first law is a robot may not injure a human being or may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. That's the first law. Second law is a robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except when such orders would conflict with the first law. And then the third law is a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. So this is actually something really kind of fascinating because by Asimov's own kind of clarification, he didn't even actually see these as needing to be put down onto paper because it's really common sense. Humans wouldn't create a tool that would violate any of these laws. You can't so instead of a robot, let's say
not intentionally.
Well, I mean, right. But I mean, but intentionality is the point, right? When you create a tool, the intention of that creation, how someone else takes a tool and uses it does not negate the intention of the creator of the tool. Right? I mean, could you agree with that?
Yeah. Have a tool that can self-think.
Yeah.
Because normally a tool has to be directed at something for it to cause injury.
Well, and you can argue that an AI is directed at something as well. Learned intelligence.
At the world.
Learned intelligence.
Or at the task.
The goal at hand. Which actually is where in 1956, Elijah Bailey actually made the argument. And, well, okay, so sorry. So there were the 3 laws of robotics. Then Asimov actually, in response to the statement that you actually just made, Green, actually wrote another one that actually preceded all of them, and he called it the 0th law. And he says a robot may not harm humanity or by inaction allow humanity to come to harm. So basically what this does is this opens the door to robots playing a longer game and allowing individual pieces of humanity to come to harm if the overall humanity doesn't come to harm, which actually was taken up later by another author who was Elijah Bailey in 1956, made an argument to the 0th law and actually modified it further, saying that a robot may not harm a human being unless they find a way to prove that ultimately the harm done would benefit humanity in general.
The Hitler effect.
Yeah, kind of. I struggle with the Hitler effect because of our conversation about timelines. Mm-hmm. But yes, and that's entirely, it's a separate argument, but it kind of, to me, blends. But yes, yeah, pretty much it is that effect. And Green, do you want to expand on, since you brought that up, do you want to expand on what that is?
Oh, just the fact that if you were to, well, I mean, it kind of blends the timeline effect of if you were to go back and kill Hitler, would you actually prevent something or create an opening for something much worse? Mm-hmm. That's the problem with the AI idea. Like, if an AI can prove or a robot can prove that by getting rid of said person X or whoever, it would actually benefit humanity, that's a really kind of tenuous type argument, just because you can't necessarily prove into the future what that person's going to do, or if by getting rid of that person it would actually create a worse scenario in the long run.
Right, and that's where you have authors such as Arthur C. Clarke and a number of different science fiction authors who kind of took the laws and so to kind of take a look at the literary history of AI. Really, one of the biggest things was, how can we break the laws without breaking the laws, right? Like Philip K. Dick did this in pretty much every single novel that he'd had, or not novel, I guess short story. His biggest thing was, how can we make a loophole, or how can we exploit the loopholes within these laws in a way that doesn't break the laws, but makes it really break the law? You know, like the whole Total Recall, Blade Runner, all those books that were, or those movies that were based in Philip K. Dick's stories. That's what they were. They were all about the moral imperatives, or the moral issues that those laws create. And that's where a concept such as computational transparency really comes into play. And I want to say it was Clark that kind of introduced this idea, but basically computational transparency is where you have a situation in which an AI is allowed to do exactly what Bailey was talking about, or what you're kind of mentioning here, is allow harm to come to an individual as long as they can prove in a computation that they reveal to everyone and that everyone agrees with, that that action or inaction would actually benefit humanity as a whole. And Justin, I know you were going to weigh in on this one.
Oh no, I was just it's actually, that's following those laws actually mimics us as human beings following our sets of morals and ethics. While we try to, traverse our lives. We do the same check, like a character in a science fiction movie who we should. Most people do. Some people are broken and they don't, but they should be taken out of service. They're broken. But it's the same process. And the only difference is who put these structures in place, who put these laws in place. For a human being with an organic, actual intelligence, it's environment and indoctrination into a certain way of thinking. To an artificial intelligence, it is it's the rigid structure of its programming, which are the laws within the confines of which it actually is allowed to operate. And Blues can probably speak to this better than I could, just because he's more versed in like computer programming. But I would think the more open-ended the laws, the wider a spectrum an artificial intelligence would have within which to operate. But a machine making a judgment call, because we actually have machines today that make judgment calls. You're seeing it all the time now with self-driving cars. Now it's on a very short scale. It's on a very short timeline and a small scale that they're actually able to take past learned behavior of other motorists on the road and make a judgment call really quick based on that. This is very small scale compared to the complex, the complex neural processes of the human brain. But these are the baby steps that lead to the giant leaps. And just real quick before I know Blue had something, but I just wanted to point out there actually is something called a neural network, which is what you actually have in your brain. It's a network of neurons firing, and they act almost like tiny little switches, sending and stopping bioelectrical signals. And there's actually an artificial neural network, and they exist in little small, they're, in the thousands of processors. A large artificial neural network will have hundreds or thousands of processor units, which mimic the individual neurons in your brain. The human brain has billions of neurons. So what we're lacking here is the ability to reliably recreate the scale of the human brain. And no one can quite say what it is about these billions of neurons interconnected that it's the closest thing to magic we have on our planet is whatever happens inside the billions of neurons that makes you, that is that spark of a consciousness.
We do have one advantage as far as neural networks go over machine neural networking, in so much that the way that machines work on a binary basis for the most part, pretty much almost exclusively, but our brains work on a chemical basis too. Mm-hmm. So not only are you having these electrical impulses during the neurons, but you're also having different types of chemicals flooding through your brain, which affects it in different ways. So it can give it extra boost or be a detriment, giving it a depressant type feel, which Blue, I know you've got a ton of background in with the psychology and everything. So we actually can function in a three-way stance. It's not just binary, but you also have the chemical component.
And our neurons are actually capable of what's called an analog signal, whereas most computers function with what's called a digital signal or a discrete signal, which is a 1 or a 0. There are two states. It's a 1 or a 0. An analog signal exists on a scale between whatever you want to set the scale to be, 0 to 100%, 0 to 10, 10 to 465. Doesn't matter. But you can actually have variable signals there. Which, yes, you are absolutely correct, is a very big advantage for us.
Yes. It gives us the ability to actually function in a much more precise manner. Yeah, dynamic.
Which is actually, so there's a couple things I want to kind of touch on with that. First off, so working kind of backwards here. In regards to the analog signal, that's actually something that we're trying to develop in technology, is converting that into so that they're not restricted to a digital thing. And it's very interesting. The other thing that I really kind of liked, Justin, with what you were saying is that comment about magic, which it's one of my favorite quotes from Arthur C. Clarke, is that basically any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. It's one of my favorite quotes from him. But it really is, and it's so cool. Looking at the research that's being done in trying to convert the knowledge that we have about the human brain into a artificial learned entity, and that actually brings me to kind of one of my other points. Real there is this is actually something that I kind of work on, and that is learned intelligence, and so that kind of goes into what's usually considered. So everyone's probably somewhat familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs for natural intelligent individuals, or natural individuals like humanity. There is actually a hierarchy of needs within data science and basically artificial intelligence, and that actually stems into kind of blends into what you were talking about. Just real quick, there's actually whereas Maslow only had 5 levels of hierarchy, the data science actually breaks it out into 6. And it's not just the hierarchy of needs, it's also the hierarchy of development. And so the first level is basically data collection. And that's basically asking the question, what do you need and what is available? And that's one of the big things when we're kind of developing something that we're going to be looking at building a rudimentary AI, or basically, which is the final form, something that is self-actualized. But so the first step is basically, how do we collect this? What do we need to collect? Is it available? Where, and all that. The second stage is what we call moving and storing, or data flow. And so what we do with that is this is the part where you kind of decide, where do we store the information, and basically how easy it is to access or analyze that information. And then once we kind of get that stage done, we go to the third stage, which is exploring and transforming, which is also what a lot of data scientists call data cleaning. which is where basically we analyze the data and we say, okay, what is missing? What needs to be changed with the data? And, how does this all kind of get better? Which then blends into aggregating and labeling it. So it's a fourth stage. That's basically, this is where you kind of, if you ever have heard the term business intelligence or data analysts, this is it. Data analysis and business intelligence is this fourth stage, which is aggregating it. And this is where we begin to basically build features that we're going to incorporate into what's called a learning model. A lot of businesses out there, especially in the financial world, and Green, I'm sure you're starting to see a lot of this as well as I am. This is where a lot of us are. Financial institutions such as banks, this is where a lot of them are right now. Is we are learning and we're aggregating these and we're labeling all the data. We have years and years of data, and we're actually kind of transcending into the next stage, which is what's the learning and the optimizing. And this is where you see a lot of data experimentation. So what this is, data experimentation this is what is considered the basic level of machine learning. There are banks out there, and I actually am not allowed to say the names of them, but there are banks out there who have rudimentary AI that help them do their daily jobs. And they have spent years and years, and this is one of the things, if you guys follow me on Twitter a couple months back when I was out at a conference, I actually got to spend a lot of time talking to some of these companies. And they have spent years and years building these learning processes and learning models for these basic programs in which they can turn around and, for banks. So for banks, the big thing that we focus on is lending, right? Lending is that's the bread and butter of banks. And so a lot of these learning models are based around, do we lend or do we not lend? Do we approve or decline a deal? All this, what are we looking at? All these different data points.
All the statistics about who would actually be a good lender.
And there's a ton, right, opportunities for lending, the risk management of that lending. It's a huge situation for banks. Learning models that are being built right now for my line of business are basically taking all these different data points, analyzing them, and then kicking out a basically what's called a scorecard to tell the lender or the individual asking, what's the risk, what's the potential turnaround, the detriment, all these different data points. And then that allows us to more quickly make a decision. And there are companies out there even today who, up until very recently, we have seen that only being used as kind of giving advice, like, hey, this is probably not a good person to lend to, but you need to review it. Now you're seeing a lot of companies, or well, not a lot, but you're starting to see companies who are letting those programs completely decide on their own. Mm-hmm. And that is basically creating a very quick turnaround time, because what that's doing is it's saying, hey, these are the data points. This is the data spread that we have. This is the outliers that we're going to be on the lookout for. But if they fall within the median of this bell curve, they're good. They're approved. We'll give them these conditions, blah, blah, blah. Still have the human interaction, but that actually allows the human involvement to be increased on a human relationship level. Whereas the data analysis, the business intelligence, is being analyzed by a machine. And so what you're seeing is that's where a lot of companies are today. There's not, I would argue that currently in reality, there's not a lot of self-actualized AIs out there. There is arguments, depending on who you talk to, that there are. They're very rare and usually extremely expensive. So a lot of companies are not investing that in that particular thing. But that's kind of where the hierarchy of development comes from. As far as the hierarchy of needs, it's really actually kind of simple for a computer. You have power, parts, and peace. And that kind of the argument there is that, the first level of needs for any artificial intelligence is power. Electricity. How do you power the hardware that it exists in? Just the same as a human would be, physiological, personal security, food, water, all that. And then the next part is kind of parts, and that kind of goes into self-repair. Like, how do I take care? How does this entity take care of itself. And then the final and the biggest part, just the same as with a natural intelligence, is self-actualization. For an artificial intelligence, it's kind of the same. It's a peace with the world around it. And actually, the contradiction here is that humanity is actually arguably artificial intelligence's greatest threat, which kind of ties into the argument here that it's like, hey, the person who created you is actually the biggest problem. And this is where you see a lot of science fiction kind of take off, as far as, like the Terminator series, the atrocious iRobot movie,
Ultron.
Gosh, that was the other one. I was like, there was another one that I couldn't remember. Ultron was that as well. But I mean, and that's really where you see a lot of these really like dark and dystopian kind of models and ideas. That part is what they focus on.
Yeah.
So
you
yeah,
gotta watch Chappie.
I know. You told me that. I watched Bright today. I had the day off,
Oh,
so I watched Bright. Oh my gosh, it's amazing! Big
sweet.
shout out to that team that made that. That was an amazing movie.
So let's bring this back into
Destiny
and how that relates back to the AI. And I think we should bring in our first caller.
Oh, the Grizzly one?
Yeah. Beard. There.
I'm a first caller? Hang on, what? Wait a minute.
Long-time listener.
Long-time listener, yes.
Hello, this is FFC Tech Support. How can we help you?
Oh, Jesus, don't you even today. No, I don't need to hear that. Please, no. Please, for the love of God, no.
So let's talk about the dangers of tech support AI.
Dangers of tech support, really?
Dangers of tech support is...
Dangers of tech support is limiting AI so that it can't take over the world. It might do a better job. What?
Nah, no one can replace Pins. He might throttle me if I break my computer again, but no one can replace him.
Look, let's not talk about throttling, okay? Nobody needs to think about that right now.
Should have that happen again. I've actually had requests from people to have more recordings of you with broken soundboard.
Oh, Lord.
He's going to have to figure out how to break it and also how to fix it when we're done.
Fantastic.
So, within Destiny itself, we have a couple of examples of true AIs and some partial AIs, would you say?
Limited.
Like limited?
Yeah.
Limited AIs.
That's a better wording for it. Let's just list off the ones that we know. Rasputin's the big one. Exos are a version of an AI.
Are they? Anyway.
Yes. I will argue that they are.
From a technical support, like from a purely physical version, yes.
Right.
Consciousness, though?
Yeah, but...
It's,
okay.
Anyway, we
I will argue.
Gonna say, we'll be here all night.
I know. Yeah.
What Exo really are. Like,
right.
it could honestly be like its own video. It really could be.
So, update on Exos.
Yeah, you may as well.
Chat.
Noted.
No,
Putting it back on the poll. So we have Rasputin, Exos to an extent ish, failsafe, which is more of a partial. And which other ones? Blue.
Okay, so we got. Yeah, no, sorry. I was trying to let you talk.
It's okay.
We have war mines, submines. You have your ship artificial intelligence / operating systems, weapons, artificial intelligence and operating systems. You have nanotechnology such as SIVA. And then you have exos, which I understand, but exos I kind of consider as an advanced form of frames in general. So within frames, you have actually your own hierarchy breakout there. We know of, so this is where I might get disagreed with here, but there's three types of frames. We have the Exos, we have the 9940s, and then the 5530s. And then technically, I think there was a precursor really
type one.
Yeah, precursor that we saw in Ishtar Academy, but we never got a model number on it. So I mean, like, I don't know what they are. They're there, and they are referred to as frames. But in game right now, we do have those 3 different types. And then really actually a one that got introduced in Destiny 2 that I'm actually kind of excited to see more about is planetary operating systems. Mm-hmm. You see that in the Lost Pacific area with on Titan.
What they were trying to do with it?
Well, it's just like the operating system is still like somewhat operational, and like it's got like the random like little jingles about, you know, how it's like not Clovis spray.
Right. I would argue that's not an AI.
Well, no, but I mean it's a rudimentary form of artificial intelligence because it maintains the life life support systems of that facility.
Real quick, it might make it a lot easier for the conversation if we just kind of laid out the 4 basic types of AI.
Yes, please.
So there's like 4 pretty universally held different types of AI. The first is a reactive machine.
Oh, okay.
I would probably put Siva in the reactive machine category, but just if you need a Destiny example. But these are just simple artificial intelligence that just react to a specific stimuli and perform a specific task. The next is a limited memory. This is what I was talking about with the self-driving cars. It's a type 2 type of AI. It can use memory data, but only from a limited period of time. It doesn't. They liken it to the difference between a self-driving car and a driver who's been driving for 15 years and uses his experience over that to make decisions on the road. The self-driving car just uses data from the last, from this drive to make decisions. The third type is called theory of mind. So this is an AI that's been modeled after the human mind to make decisions like a human mind would, and in a lot of ways functions like a human mind does. But it's missing, that little bit of magic we were talking about. And then and also theory of mind and the next one are both kind of crossing into science fiction. We don't really have AI like this. The last is type 4, self-aware AI. And this is AI that has gotten so advanced that it's able to form representations about itself. So it's actually able to make observations about itself, and it refers to itself and has, kind of feelings. So it's not murder if it's robots, but sometimes it can be.
Oh my gosh. That challenge always makes me feel bad.
So here's a question then, as far as the development of the AI or the continual development, would an AI automatically start at the self-aware space? Because don't they have to acquire so much data or input before they can somewhat become self-aware?
Well, no. To be intelligent, I'll let Blue take this. But to be intelligent, all it has to do is take inputs and make a logical decision and give an output. I can wire a very crude electrical circuit to do that. Like
right.
That's a logical circuit. I mean, so artificial intelligence at the base level, at the very low level, is very crude.
Well, my question I think has more to do, and this is going to probably set off pins in chat a little bit, but is actually with Cortana, because Cortana is based off of Dr. Halsey, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, clone of Dr. Halsey.
Is she emotionally aware when she initially is made, or is it and it wasn't until she had started some of the breaking off point, or I can't
rampancy.
Thank you, rampancy. When she started that she actually became emotionally more teenager-ish, I guess, is a terrible way to say it.
Yeah, I can take this one real quick. So I think you're asking for a part. So, I think the confusion, at least maybe my confusion here, is I'm talking like in general constructs, like not individual constructs. So like an individual construct, Cortana, for example, since we know more about Cortana's origin than we do about Rasputin's, is the only reason I kind of would go this way. Cortana was aware of herself when she was turned on. Like she was the model of AI within the Halo universe that Cortana falls within is what's called a smart AI. Which, going kind of back to Justin's hierarchy here, there are hierarchies within the AI in Halo as well. There are smart AIs, there are dumb AIs, there are base AIs. Like, supervisor is kind of a stretch between a base and a dumb AI. And the dumb AIs are, like, we call them, quote, dumb AIs. They're still super intelligent artificial intelligences, but they're not capable of. Yeah, they're more reactionary. They're more
intuition
of that,
and
right. They're more that theory of mind kind of level.
Okay.
And they're also, whereas like a smart AI is able to make intuitive leaps and connections and conclusions, and they're self-aware much more. But yeah, Cortana as a smart AI, the smart AI instances are fully aware of themselves when they're first created. Right. Okay. Pens in chat is clarifying that dumb AIs are basically, they are experts on a particular field, whereas a smart AI is,
and more all-encompassing.
A jack of all trades. It can be a master of all trades. The trade-off is they have a limited lifespan, right? They have a limited shelf life because they think themselves to death. They
can learn multiple constructs, like they can do, versus dumb AIs, which are
so like a good example
within their own framework of this specific framework.
Yeah, so like a good example of a dumb AI is basically very similar to what we see in Destiny and the planetary war mines. It's basically a difference between what I would consider a generic planetary war mind and Rasputin, right? Rasputin is kind of more of a smart AI construct, whereas the golden age kind of presentation that I kind of read as the war minds are more of those dumb AIs. They're very structured, they're very limited in their scope of what they know, and they can make decisions. They are experts within that field of expertise. Like within that particular field, they are the top of the field. Outside of the field, they have next to no knowledge, and they're not designed to extrapolate information. Whereas Rasputin, as kind of the controller of that entire network, he can take that information from Warmind A and Warmind B and extrapolate an answer for situation C. That's the difference between
adaptability,
right? Dynamic. It's the dynamic. Right. It goes back to the comment that Justin had. Justin, I know you have maybe something to say about this, but it goes back into that conversation between a analog and a digital decision process and decision like interpretation. There's a smart AI would have a range, whereas a dumb AI would kind of be more limited to that on-off. And that's a terribly oversimplified answer, but Justin, you might be able to say that a bit better.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. Do you know we actually have an artificial intelligence right now that can paint a subject, any subject you put in front of it, and paint it in the style of, say, Van Gogh, down to the weight of the brushstrokes. It can paint a painting when they hook it up to a CNC with a brush attachment. That same AI that is, in terms of ability, smarter than I'll ever be, could never learn to play something very simply on the guitar. It's just not in its programming. It's a dumb AI without changes to its it's what would you call it? It's substrate or it's base programming. No, you're good. Like without changes, fundamental changes to that, it will never be more than that. And that's, Blue's absolutely correct. Dumb AI is an incredible misnomer. I would prefer like a term like focused AI or
I can see that. I like that actually.
It's actually an artificial intelligence that's built for a specific purpose, and in that purpose, it's second to none. But yes, it struggles to do the things that make human operators invaluable, which is making important decisions on limited information, using things like past experience, learned behaviors, intuition, gut feelings, things like that make us, kind of irreplaceable at the moment. Maybe one day that'll be different. But yeah, that's kind of the difference between smart AI and dumb AI. I would say someone like Rasputin is more a smart AI, and who would you say Failsafe is?
Failsafe.
Failsafe would be more on.
She transcends a bit, but
I'm gonna say she started as a dumb AI, then they unhinged her.
Yeah,
and now at this point she's
I think
able
that's part of the split
build.
Too. Honestly,
yes, I think that's exactly right.
Is the split somewhat similar to a rampancy, or is it more of an infection?
I think actually it might be a little bit of both, because here's another really fun one of my fun quotes is the line between genius and insanity is whether or not it works. I mean, because that's the thing is like if you look at some of the things that the geniuses in human history have done, it's like, if that had not worked, you would have been the laughing stock for like centuries. But because it worked, because it like against all odds, this one little thing worked, you're seen as like a genius. And it really, it's that question of that ingenuity to think outside the box. That's again kind of going back to the difference between AIs, and that's what, as far as kind of coming a little bit full circle as to back into the topic of the episode, that's where it starts to get dangerous, because that degree of ingenuity also means that they don't really, because you can't think outside the box if you're locked inside the box, right? If you're bound,
being able to adapt,
right?
The surround.
But the problem is that because once you, and this is again kind of going back to the science fiction that you see a lot, or science fantasy, whatever you want to call it, that you see a lot of about AIs and the dangers of those creatures or those entities, I guess, is the question of, okay, if you allow the AI to break or ignore the rules, like the laws of robotics, you can have amazing things. However, you can also have absolutely terrifying things happen. Justin,
you'll have Arnold going, "I'll be back."
Well, yeah, or just go watch a couple episodes of Black Mirror and have fun with that. Right, Cookie?
That's another good one.
We call it a cookie.
Oh God! Except Cookie. Okay, that's a bad example, because Cookie actually shows the problem with humanity, not the problem with the AI. But
I was going to say this. There's one of my favorite AIs in all of science fiction is Mycroft Holmes from the Moon. From The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. I actually, when we talk about failsafe, it really makes me think of Mycroft Holmes and Rasputin and all these different AI in Destiny, in that he became self-aware simply because the technician, and you got to remember that book was written in the 70s or It was written. It was written a while ago.
I think. Yeah.
There were no Pentium chips when this
But
book
they had
was written
positronic
by.
brains.
Yeah. So basically, the programmer for this supercomputer, which took up a whole room, kind of like the Warmind room, that you go, the Warsat room or whatever, for all the Rasputin missions. The programmer didn't do programming like Blue does programming at work. He actually went in and made hardware alteration to logical circuits, kind of like our first computers. When you see the first IBM that was so big, that took up 2 rooms. So he would actually go in and he would be making solder connections, and he would be hooking up logical alterations to his physical circuits. And he, at some point, exceeded the number of connections that exist in a human brain. And all of a sudden, this supercomputer is now self-aware and is now reached the highest tier of artificial intelligence. So I guess my question is, do we think maybe Rasputin entities in Destiny like Rasputin, or maybe even to a lesser extent Failsafe, is it possible that they just got their hooks in too many resources?
I think with Rasputin, that's exactly the case.
Yeah,
I'm going to say, I would say Rasputin would fit that. I don't think Failsafe does, because she's a little... She was meant with more of a intended purpose, I guess, if we go back to what we were saying before.
And I guess my question back on to kind of counter argue that, though, Beard, is also, though, that could also be the explanation for the split, because if you think about what Failsafe, kind of the name Failsafe is, she's a failsafe for, I guess, what would be implied the original ship's AI. So what if she overwrote the original ship's AI, and that's actually the split?
Which is kind of where I was thinking. The other side of the argument, and where I'm not like totally sure that I want to go like one way or another with it, is she has access to the Vex network, right?
Right.
Like she's able to legitimately think and build on like what she needs from any point in space or time, and at least theoretically.
Mm-hmm.
And by like having all of this access, it has been a question in my mind of like how far she can go. Her initial intended purpose was a very low end split. It was a very like program purpose. Turning that hinge off though and allowing it to like open up, I think that's where the difference does come in. That's where that argument does show up. And I doubt that the split personality, which is one thing that I wish that we heard the crew kind of talk about with Failsafe, if like she did develop that split personality when they unhinged her, that would be fantastic to know.
Oh,
and it's
like after
this
they
question,
crashed.
Yeah, like when did it happen? When did Failsafe start to build that? Because if we knew more of that end, like did she develop it quickly? Or was it something that took that long in order for it to do? Because we're obviously still not sure on like timeline and everything like that. We have a fair idea, but we're not sure. Plus, Vex time travel. What? Green, I know you had something.
Well, the thing with Failsafe that kind of drives me a little crazy is that we know kind of her capacities of what she's actually able to function at. Like she's mainly functioning, and you get this percentage quote whenever you go and hang out by her. She's mainly functioning on just like base unit like survival functions. Like the core, the nuclear core is functioning at a high level. There's a couple of other things, but her data stores, her memory stores are actually not, they're like at 30%, if I remember correctly. I have to go quote somewhere, I have it written down, but she's functioning at such a low percentage at this point because of the break, I'm assuming, or if just natural degrading that she has. My question is, what
go ahead, I'm sorry.
What caused her to get to that point where, besides the ship kind of falling down and falling apart, what would cause her to come forward as the primary AI? Just cut off from the data stores with the AI that used to run the ship? Or was there something else?
And that's, I think, part of the problem where we don't know a lot of information on how a colony ship is built. We don't know necessarily like where the data stores are within said colony ship. We don't know how much of Failsafe's AI is necessarily integrated into her AI banks themselves. Now, is that whole thing that she's encased in, is that her entire supply? Because the actual core for the system, I think, runs at like 85%. And they were gearing up for a very, very long trip. They were gearing up to go somewhere in the area about 7 billion miles away because they were heading towards the Kepler system. And this would have been something that even at like 85% for like what they were looking at, if we're gauging it by like it's 700-800 year timeline where the collapse had happened, that's still not enough. Like, not even close. Yeah, that's part of the problem. Like, we don't, and you know, theoretical speeds when you end up hitting interstellar space and so on. Boy, when did I end up? Anyway, this isn't going to be an interstellar space travel episode. So
why can't it?
Oh God! Here comes Matt.
At some point, we should talk about that.
Let's go to Mars, dude.
Well, you see, even NASA might now. Boeing's going to get there before everybody else. Anyway, that's where
they can't follow through on.
What's that?
Just because they made a bit they can't follow through on.
No, what I meant by that, like, we don't know necessarily like those data stores. The data stores could be like corrupted, hindered, etc., and that is by Failsafe's means to possibly keep the crew alive longer or keep herself in service longer. Is it something where, like our brains, when they go into cryostasis, the thinking is after so long they will end up kind of losing a little bit of their retention. They'll basically start to, in a way, lose part of memory, so on, because you've been in cryostasis so long. Is the same thing kind of happening with Failsafe? Because she's been out there as long as she has, and she knows that. So she needs to start flipping systems off. And because of this, she starts to lose a lot of the data stores that she has inside the system. But again, are those data stores just within that AI vault, quote-unquote vault is what we're going to call it? Or are they on another completely different part of the ship? Are they spread out along the ship? Because if that's the case, then 30% might make a little bit of sense when hull integrity is 18%.
Here's a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you have now I'm trying to remember what Justin called it as far as the hierarchy. When you have an AI that is focused on one task or focused on one field, what happens when you have that kind of AI that gets possibly integrated with a reactionary AI?
So you're almost thinking like a war mind and a sub mind.
Not a war mind exactly, because that's too advanced. I'm thinking more like a ship AI that's functionality is primarily for the ship or for taking care of the crew and whatnot, like Failsafe, with an AI. And I know Blue knows where I'm going with this because I've talked about it with him a few times. With an AI type like Siva, what happens when you combine the two of them?
Well, the Siva would be kind of like a tool.
Right.
I'm going to say it. At that point, you look at what was it? Was it Exodus Black, where the card where it says the Sivamites were buzzing?
Exodus Red.
Red. Okay. Yeah. But the Red had mentioned how, you know, everything was just kind of buzzing in the way that, like, in the back of its mind, basically trying to take itself over, which is incredibly interesting with the way that, like, an AI could effectively use it. Sorry, Justin, I know you had something to add to that.
Oh, no worries. No, yeah, you're absolutely right. But we've actually seen that dichotomy or that hierarchy already exists in the game. In Rise of Iron, you had Rasputin for a limited time, at least, directing Siva. And you can kind of think of it like your computer when you boot it up. You have your operating system, which is the smartest component of your computer's software. Mm-hmm. But at its disposal, your operating system has many different sub-programs, or they call them applications now. But you can think of, in this example, the higher mind or the higher intelligence, like Failsafe or Rasputin or whatever, as your operating system. And you could think of Siva as, say, malware bytes. Malware bytes doesn't know how to do anything but just delete malware. Mm-hmm. Just consume, enhance, replicate malware all day long, right? But it needs to be directed by certain things in your operating systems to allow. It needs permissions to do what it needs to do.
Don't mess with your registry, kids.
Yeah. So blue can. Well, sometimes you've got to mess with your registry, because sometimes people are nosy as to what they're getting for Christmas.
What's that? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't dig into that.
Which that's the I hate.
Welcome to my world. We live in. Welcome to my world.
Basically,
don't you hate that the world we live in now is the equivalent of when we were kids, which was shaking the present under the tree, is now going into your parents' search history on Google.
Clear your cache file, kids.
I got my dad's Google Wallet number.
Oh God.
No, carry on.
Gavin's not getting anything for Christmas anymore. Keeps breaking into Dad's safe.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess getting back to it, like that would be the curious thing. Like, yes, we've seen how Rasputin and Siva can interact in a way, not directly, but at least through words. But in terms of how the different levels of AI could interact with something like Siva and what it would do with that information, I think is the point of why they kind of showcased what was going on with Red, just to say, like, I know it's there. I know it's trying to force itself, like, into my brain. Mm-hmm. I know it's trying to take something over, but I'm not sure if this is a good idea or not. And that's why it needs to refer back to Rasputin to say, do I like let this in, let it do its thing, or is this a bad idea? Well, it doesn't have either the brain power, or it wasn't programmed enough to know to do so or not.
This is a side question, slightly a little bit off topic. It's somewhat still on topic. Was Siva capable of only planetary development in so much as it's building things machine-like, or was it capable of it?
No, it was capable of building anything.
Yep, I gotta say, until you ended up giving it another pattern, that's at least the way it's kind of outlined in the Owl Sector records. Until you give it a different directive.
Right, and
it will continue to build on that. What's that? Sorry.
Sorry. You also have the Willa Bray conversation within the Siva fragments, in which she's explaining the colonization protocols, in which they're basically the entire point of the Exodus project was basically to send Siva out ahead of the colonists, so that when the colonists did land on planet blank or whatever, that they would have, excuse me, that they would have a home already thriving.
So bear with me. There is a scandal on Nessus that talks about how, or maybe not a scandal, it may be just a line that Failsafe says that she remembers, like, watching the planet be transformed. Granted, in reference, it's primarily in reference to the Vex landing there, which is also kind of weird to think about, that the Vex landed there after the Exodus Black Crew did.
Yeah.
But could theoretically, because if we do know that her crew was alive for at least a very, very short time, at least, after the crash and everything, wouldn't they automatically implement Siva with Siva on board? Because Siva is on board Exodus Black. We do know that because there are a few voice lines where Failsafe says that. Wouldn't they automatically implement Siva to try to terraform the rock that they landed on into some habitat that they can actually use? Which would make me wonder if Failsafe does have the split with Siva as part of the red part of the shift. That's kind of awkward because it doesn't know what to do anymore.
The argument I might have with that one is that the codes for Siva seem like they're locked behind a set of clearance codes that either she does not have access to or have been lost, or Captain Jacobson was the only one that could use them, so on. The question is going to be, did they even know they had it? Because the way that, again, I'm reaching back into the Al Sector stuff, the way that it seemed like they were trying to cater or build Siva was kind of like an unknown entity in a lot of ways. It was just like, we need to shove this thing out there and get it going. We also don't necessarily know, and this kind of deals with the collapse a little bit, but we don't know how quickly they needed to just get it on board and say, okay, this is kind of ready to go and our world's getting blown up here, so here, take it. And that kind of gets lost, I think, in translation of how that could all be interpreted or looked at. At least my opinion. Sorry.
No, I mean, I'm just kind of continuing down the thought, because if Siva is locked away, quote unquote, Siva does look for a directive. That is like kind of sort of a basic directive that it has. Like we kind of get that with the squirrel suit card when the mites are buzzing around. You kind of get the feeling that they're trying to get a directive of some sort.
Yeah, that's Old Russia 3.
Yeah. So with that card in mind, even if Jacobson did not reach and release Siva upon Nessus, would it be possible for Siva to continually try to find a directive of some sort if Siva is still... Problem is, Siva can affect organic material too.
Well,
that's the thing that drives me crazy.
Yeah, and we know it can because of the Iron Lords at the very least.
That and clarification from Blue before we move on.
Sorry, I'm really sorry. I just wanted to interject real quick. Exodus Red is on Ghost Fragment Old Russia 2.
Yes.
We get that. That is not the one that has Siva, so I misspoke. We don't know that it was an Exodus ship. The Old Russia 3 is the one that is speaking about the Siva mites buzzing in the cargo hold, and that one sounds like that ship. I always confuse these two cards, so that's my fault. Exodus Red never actually launched. So it's still on Earth, and it had colonists. It doesn't look like it had anything with Siva in it. The Siva... I think we've had this argument before, actually. I'm sure we have, because I always confuse these cards.
They're easy to confuse, just with the way that they're worded and everything.
I know,
honestly.
It sounds like it's the same freaking person thing that's speaking, which it might be if it's a frame speaking. It could be a duplicate program. But Old Russia 2 is Exodus Red. It has nothing to do with Siva. It has the colonist. Old Russia 3 is the Siva, but we don't have clarification if that is an Exodus ship or if they had a different designation. I'm imagining that they might have had a different designation for the Siva ships from the colonist ships. And if that's the case, then that might explain why. But it begs the question why Siva is on Nessus. But that might explain why the crew didn't use Siva, because they might not have Siva.
They may not have even known about it. Like I said, like they honestly could have just been launched with it, and that was it. Which, and personally, after knowing about Exodus Black and knowing about the fact that did launch and so on. I have always now interpreted 3 as being the initial AI for Exodus Black, saying, I don't know what these things are. What do I do with them? And Rasputin just says, take them, because you're going to need them. And that's at least how I've always interpreted that part. But again, that is definitely open for interpretation.
Okay, another clarification is it's Old Russia 4, not 3.
God dang it!
I will get these things eventually.
Okay.
Hey, I'm only human, okay? I'm not.
Well,
I'm not an AI.
Because 4. Are you sure? Are you sure about? No, I'm kidding.
Apparently, Justin thinks I'm failsafe, so that's take that for what
I
you
thought
will.
he was.
Don't we have clarification that Justin is Cade?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, there we go.
I don't know how
said
much
that.
argument people are going to have with that statement, to be honest.
Yes.
I'm actually okay with that.
We've been compared to the Vanguard mentors multiple times, so I'm okay with this.
Okay, so Old Russia 4 is the one that deals with this
Yes.
unnamed Exodus. It's totally black, by the way. But the unnamed Exodus ship.
It's not.
But it's not.
It's
I
not
know.
clarified, but it totally
It's-
could
No,
be.
no. Hang on. Okay, bear with me. It says
Okay.
in Old Russia 4, quote, where once my cargo holds were full of tools, weapons, and materials, now they hold barely contained possibilities. End quote.
Right,
So
right.
he basically is saying that
It could be a
the ship has
terraforming
been...
ship.
Yeah, it's a terraforming ship. It doesn't have anything other than the
Right.
mites.
But do we know that there was anybody else on Exodus Black
Yes,
besides
we do
the
know. We do know that
typical
there
crew?
were colonists and crew.
Look at Sturm and Drang, because they actually talk about
Yes,
boarding
and
Exodus Black.
I was doing something the other day on Nessus, and I don't remember if it's a transcript, it's a dialogue or what, but I got something that basically mentioned the colonist and crew of Exodus Black.
Yeah, right.
That's my only that's like my big argument against that because I would love that ship
Like
to be
that one
Exodus
being
Black
the same.
because
Well-
that would make a lot of sense. But I
if
just
we-
don't think it is.
If we flip that argument, we initially said that once the cargo holds were full of it, that I can understand. But we're still not necessarily reserving back to the colonist holds at all, because those pods seem like they would have been
Okay. I see
in
what you're saying.
a
Okay.
different zone, if nothing
And we
else,
know
of
that
the ship.
Exodus ships were massive, so
Yeah, I'm going to say these things are like, what, 5 or 6 times the size of a shuttle with about the width of about 20 times that. So these things are massive. Like, they're able to hold a ton of stuff. But that would be the only contention I think I would have with that. I definitely see where you're going, but considering that they would want to keep most of that perhaps together, just to keep Siva, colonists, and everything else together, I would think that you would want to merge those.
But see,
because
I guess my other contention to that is that would defeat the purpose of sending Siva out in advance, so that when the colonists did land, there would already be a facility there. If they
Well,
were
this is
How
the-
quickly Siva would work.
Mhm.
okay,
well, this is also
I guess
the-
yeah.
This is also, though, the point of making sure that the ship has to be effectively, 1, spaceworthy, but 2, be able to have a habitable zone to survive for an after point. Let's bring up what's the Martian, the one with Matt Damon.
Yes.
Even if you go ahead and look at the fact that there has to be on Mars, obviously we can't breathe. If you go to another planet and whatnot that you just cannot utilize anything in terms of its natural resources, that means you would have to make up a type of habitable space. And this would need to be done. And you would have to almost factor that in with the math to know, well, how fast does Siva actually work? And how long is it that we need to make sure that this ship is capable of producing nitrogen, oxygen, atmosphere, and be able to circulate air, be able to live, breathe, etc. And all of this would have to kind of curtail back to it. But that's the biggest thing. Blue points it out here in chat too. Even if they were awake on initial landing. And I think that's very true. With something like Siva, you wouldn't need anything to like be acted upon. You give it the option to say, go build trees or something and build up this carbon
Carbon,
oxygen, nitrogen. Yeah. I'm gonna say just for carbon based living and let it go. Could that have been a possibility with Siva? You know, these are the things we don't necessarily know on its internal working. But
as far as like what we know of Siva, other
than it's the most interesting AI we've got in the game,
and it's only reactionary.
It's also the most limited.
Yes.
Yeah, which is silly. Which is so silly.
Gosh, but that's what makes it so fascinating. Like the whole Wrath of the Machine problem was because of bad programming.
It's like the Fallen have no idea what this thing does. They're just like, we'll go play with it and poke at it with sticks.
The very first thing I thought of when we first land on Nessus was, this is where Siva is.
Well, the red trees and everything really give that sense.
And because we know that when Siva created things for Wrath of the Machine, red was a very predominant color in that expansion with the different ropey vine Twizzler sticks all over the place. And
the first scannable for Rise of Iron, where you actually encountered the Twizzler sticks out in the Cosmodrome. That's immediately what I think of every time when I start thinking about Siva. Absolutely.
Yeah,
where are my memory fragments then?
Look, you.
Dormant. They're dormant. Is what happened. They're dormant.
Sorry, that one was it's just it was low hanging.
In other words,
on
kids.
That one.
In other words, kids, we're gonna science the ish out of this.
So that's the most fascinating AI. I would say it's the most fascinating because it's the most alien AI to us.
But it's not. That's what I would argue is that it's so fascinating because it is, but it's also not.
We can see. Well,
because it's something that we can have in reality.
Right. It's not because we can experience it, but it is because it's the least like us.
Oh,
you can
okay,
attribute.
I got you.
You can attribute more emotion and stuff like that to not necessarily Rasputin, because I don't know if that guy has emotions, but
well, I would argue he probably doesn't.
I mean, he does listen to Tchaikovsky. That's all I'm gonna say.
Osiris?
He was crazy. So,
are we saying Osiris doesn't have emotions?
No,
Rasputin. I think we were going.
Oh, Rasputin.
Yeah.
Rasputin. No. I think I've always been a big proponent of the argument that I think we attribute a lot of human kind of a personality to the Rasputin that's just not there. Like we tend to kind of humanize things where it's just not there. Like we think that snakes are evil because they're shifty and legless, and we think that I
think that's just you, Justin.
Oh, it's just
no, it's not. I have a coworker, a male coworker, who's just as terrified of snakes, and it's hilarious.
But it's not that a snake is evil. It's just that it's not its fault. It was just built wrong. But
was it perhaps born that way?
Yes, it was born that way. No, I maintain that it was a choice to be legless. No. But what I'm getting at here is I don't think Rasputin is any more evil than he is good. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's goodness or evil there to be had. I simply think that at the highest possible level of artificial intelligence that exists, Rasputin is still operating within his own framework. And I think he's just expanded his framework to such a magnificent scale that he is able to make such complex decisions on such spectacularly undefined data. Right. That we view his actions as being, what's the difference between him executing an algorithm that's more complex than any human mind could, even think about comprehending in 1,000 years, and him acting on whim. To us, it's the same. It's like, it's kind of like the early, Aboriginals attributing thunder to the gods being mad. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's there's no anger in the sky, or unless, I'm sorry if you're an early Aboriginal and you disagree,
and you're listening to a podcast.
And you're listening to a podcast, which we've got some issues, but don't worry about it. I've never turned a listener away, but so I'm just saying we attribute things to things, you know what I mean? And
this is true.
We always try to attribute meaning to the abstract.
Right. I'm just the only thing that we do not see so much in Destiny that we've seen in other Bungie games is the AI that has an emotional bond, whether it's logical or illogical, with, I'm thinking Cortana again because she's the most readily accessible one. But
how about your Ghost?
Well,
or Cade
or Sagira or
Sagira's still a ghost.
Sagira to Osiris
or your friendly beard exo. What?
The bearded exo.
The bearded exo.
Don't get me started on beards.
Look you.
Hey, okay, but real quick, just a big shout to Justin there. The entire time you were saying all that, all I could think of was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And the answer to life, the big machine that's like, it took like, what was it, like 10 generations to answer, and it's like, the answer to life is 42.
What was it? I was
It was like everyone just lost it.
That's not much of a question, is it?
I'm sorry, but that's like the entire time you're talking about the calculations that are beyond and like all this stuff. I'm sitting there thinking of the giant computer.
Did you bring the towel?
Think of it like,
did you bring the towel?
or the robot who was
the robot who was emotionally depressed
with a GPP, genuine people personality.
We should talk about the genuinely depressed exos.
Third, we do have an. Never mind. I'm not going to say that. That's that.
I'm not talking about you, Beard. I'm talking about the other. Like, never mind.
Are you talking about when Cade got emo over that skirt just for a minute, for a hot minute?
It wasn't a hot minute. It was kind of like, several generations, perhaps.
Several years, a couple of wipes.
Along with a child that he may or may not have had. I just made myself really sad.
Yeah, Cade's sad story.
Just keep smiling, Cade.
Yeah, gallows humor can only. Yeah, the other thing, real quick, about Rasputin and the anthropomorphizing. Gosh, I cannot talk. That you're talking about,
Justin.
With
the big words.
Yeah, I know. That should teach me to try that again. The other thing too is that the reason that arguably a lot of people view AI as kind of terrifying and quote unquote evil is because AI, they're calculators. That's pure logic. There is the entire thing that you guys are saying is like, that's exactly the problem. There is no emotion. There is no emotive connection between a calculator and the people that its calculations are having to remove. I mean, you see that with Rasputin when he kind of shut down during the collapse. He was like, I'm built to win. And
I would argue that emotion is actually a flawed logical process. So think of like logical or illogical process, I guess. So if somebody gets upset, they're having an illogical response to whatever the stimulus is. And so that's why an AI like Cortana can have what is perceived as emotions because she's breaking, she's going rampant.
Well, Smart AI actually do have emotions.
Yeah,
That's the
I
thing.
think
That's the thing with smart AIs in the Halo universes. They actually do have emotions because they're modeled off the human brain, whereas like what I really like Justin's idea of focused AI or the dumb AIs. They're actually programmed, which is why a focused AI can be around for a very, very long time, and a smart AI only has 7 years before it thinks itself to death, but it's basically computing based off the responses that it has experienced, and then extrapolating situations beyond that. So, but they are able to retain emotion because their basic foundation is a human brain instead of a programmatic equation.
Right, but I'm saying that even the human brain is a programmable type thing based off of logical and illogical responses. Illogical being kind of a broken response. It's very not typical thinking about it.
Well, and I guess it also, I can argue with this for hours.
Yeah, I could, and also it's like the best kind of argument.
Oh yeah, no. I don't mean that. I don't mean that. Sorry, I apologize. I did not mean that dismissively. I apologize.
No. We know, failsafe. You're good.
Shut your modulator.
No, I guess what I was meaning there. I think it's the discrepancy here isn't between emotion, the emotional, and the emotionless. Because we have examples of human beings who are relatively emotionless. They're sociopaths. They lack human empathy. They lack some of the basic programming constructs in our neural network, our bio neural network, that make us who we are.
Right.
So that's not an inherently human thing. I think the difference is.
Wait, hang on. Sorry. What's not in? I'm sorry. Clarify that real quick. What's not innately human?
Being emotionless or being emotional is not inherently human.
Empathy.
And
see, I would argue that
emotionless is.
I would argue empathy is. I might be misunderstanding that. I think
lack of
empathy is a learned behavior, though. And any behavior.
I disagree. I completely disagree on that one. Sorry.
No,
that's not accurate. I don't.
It's a comparative learned behavior. It's a comparative learned emotional process. And any emotional process that can be created by the human brain can be recreated by programming, but you need an algorithm that's complex enough to take in all of the different ins and outs of the empathic process. But what I was trying to get at in the end, and Blue, you can tear me apart here in just a sec.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to tear you apart. I think it's a nature versus nurture conversation.
No, yeah, and there is a nature versus nurture element to it. What I was going to say is that the discrepancy between the artificial and the whether you want to call it biological intelligences isn't necessarily emotional, because emotional processes can be simulated. They can be replicated. They're actually not even that complex. I think the issue is
empathy.
This is just empathy is just another emotional process. I think the interest is the hierarchy of self-interest. And
empathy is the interaction between the two people, right? So you have empathy for another. You have to be able to feel what's a proposed feeling of somebody else.
You don't necessarily have to feel it. You have to imagine what it would be like to feel it. So It's just a comparative emotional process.
When did I step into this being a near automata debate? Because that's about what this sounds like.
Yes.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat.
Welcome to Coffee Talk.
I have my coffee right here.
Go ahead, Blue. I've got it covered.
No. And I mean, this is me kind of this is a combination. This is actually still, I mean, it's a fascinatingly hotly debated topic. Even after, decades, if not centuries of both informal and formal research as far as psychological development. It's the nature. It harkens back to the nature versus nurture debate, and that's the question of like where do human personas and the personality that creates what is considered to be human, where does that actually stem from? Is it something that's nature, or it's like instinctual and there's something in there that is just going to be there no matter what you do? Or is it something that, kind of like what you're saying, Justin, is that it's quote unquote programmed, or it's part of your nurtured history? I actually really argue that it's a combination of the two. Because in fact, I would argue that empathy, the presence of empathy, is something that is innate in the majority of humans. It is actually the absence of empathy, which is an abnormal thing, and that's kind of what you were talking about with like sociopathy. A sociopath is a person who is incapable of empathy, which kind of, to go into line with this topic tonight, is that's kind of what artificial intelligence is that they are very, very aligned more with the sociopathic tendencies. That is not to say that they can't act like they have empathy. They cannot act like they have emotion. They do often quite well. You see that with Failsafe in the quest about like how she's trying to understand depression about her crew dying, and she's like, I don't feel this. And I mean, she's very transparent about it, and I love this quest because of this actual conversation that she has with herself. And it's I don't feel this, but I know that I should be feeling this, and I want to try to understand what it means to feel this, with the understanding that I am literally incapable of feeling this. And so we go through the motions of feeling sorrow and feeling grief, but that it never transcends to the point in which it actually creates an emotional response. You can go through the motions of something, and to others they are perceived as being grieving, but that does not mean that the ability to grieve is there. Does that make sense?
It does, but Mystic actually put a really good line in chat about empathy and what it kind of is.
Right, yeah, survival instinct.
Living creatures. Even I would even argue,
it's a chemical
release. The act of empathy releases chemicals in the human brain that assist in creating bonds between people and assisting in their survival. I would even argue to the extent that plants have something similar, even though there's no like quote unquote emotion tied to it. You can see this when a tree is growing, like a brand new tree is trying to grow, and there's a giant branch of another tree there. The tree beneath will actually bend and grow around it without actually touching it.
Mm-hmm. It's an evolutionary process as well.
Is that I mean, and I'm not arguing because I don't know. Is that an empathic process, or is that simply a response to an external stimuli? Much like it'll grow towards the sun.
But I mean, with natural intelligences, what's the difference?
Right.
I'm not being facetious. I'm being serious. What's the difference? Because to the experience of the living thing, there is no difference.
Well, there's a slight difference. Like, me eliciting an emotional response from me when I hear that somebody's son passed away. I have a son. Like, that elicits an emotional response from me because there's a hypothetical situation now playing out in my head, in my mind, that I've lost that I've lost my son, and inside my brain there's a neurochemical reaction happening, and just like you're talking about, releasing endorphins or whatever it takes to make me sad or to make me have this emotional response is happening. But and my argument isn't that it's different at a chemical level or a physical level, but at a mental level, there was a period of visualization that preceded the physical response.
Correct. And here's my counter argument that you just presented. My point and my argument here is that at no point in your existence were you taught that you needed to elicit an emotional response to a part of information given to you. You were never taught that. That is something that is innately, that's just humans just do, actually not just humans, living things in general, kind of as far as we can tell, and because communication gaps between species obviously exist, but so when I speak of living things, it's predominantly human. I'm assuming if you have a level of sentience that applying
dogs. Just gonna put that out there.
Dog. I mean, right. I mean, but dogs are weird because of the dopamine response to physical touch. Like, but anyways, but yes, like there is a degree of empathy there as well. But the thing is there is never a point in your history that you were like. I know this is silly, but it's like you weren't sat down by your dad or your parents and said, okay, when someone tells you sad news, we need you to connect it to this event. No, it's when someone tells you, so, because I mean, I'm a parent. I know exactly what you're talking about. It happens to me every time someone talks about a kid left in a car. Like I get physically sick. Because
and angry
and yeah, there are a lot of emotions and words that I'm not going to say, but I mean, but that has never been. It's never been taught to me. Like I had a child, like my son was born, and before he was born, I remember getting like uncomfortable when this particular topic was brought up, but it was just it was just discomfort. Right. There was nothing really there. As soon as my son was born, and I remember like it was like 2 or 3 weeks after he was born, there was a really bad case. And I think it was in Houston. And I remember getting physically ill, and like to the degree that it's still stuck in my head. And that was never a point at which it was like, hey, now that you have a kid, you need to connect the dot. Like no one ever said that. That was just something that innately, empathetically, I was able to connect to that situation happening to me and putting myself in the shoes of that other person and experiencing those emotions. And that is what empathy is. Empathy is taking your situation, taking your sense of self and putting it in another person's sense of self, and kind of getting a feel of what that would be. And that's not something that can be taught. It can't, like, because it's all about emotions. You cannot teach emotions. You can condition over years and years of whatever input certain responses. Like you can have a Pavlovian situation, sure, but that actual spark that connects things, that's not something that's possible to be taught.
But could it be programmed? Not taught.
Okay.
Not taught.
Okay.
Allowed a space within which to grow.
Given that you don't, given that we don't know how to teach it, and given that we don't know where from whence it springs, I'm going to argue no, it can't. Because you don't know the basis of it. You can't program it because you don't know what it is. It's like the argument against the Ghost in the Machine, right? We don't know what, if you're religious, you don't know the concept of the connection between a spiritual and the physical. There's nothing in your brain that's like, hey, here's the linchpin that connects your soul to your body. Like, we don't know that, so we can't program that. Yeah, well, and green. Sorry, that's actually my next point. If you want to bring that up, sorry, beard. I'm sorry. I don't know which.
Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was only going to say, based on and this could be because I'm a highly emotional person. I tend to feel things quite a bit more. So even with something that is quote unquote unfeeling, because I'll make the argument that she can, or it can, however you really want to talk about failsafe. When she goes into second, like, flat form, for me, that's where you start to really feel the real failsafe. And in that same quest, you start to kind of hear, especially with the end, she does feel remorseful about so many different things that does happen. And she's even able, as it's been kind of pointed out already, she's able to understand that, yes, I should feel this way. Is it that she does feel that way and she's trying to keep it hidden? And that's at least the side of her that is logical. Because per this point now, she has those double sides. One side is obviously very illogical. The other is very logical. And that's where I'm having a really hard time, like, just saying that she is one thing or another, at least just focusing on her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Green, sorry. I know you had a response as well, Green.
Oh, I'm just... The thing is we could perpetuate this argument for a very long time, because this is a very hot button topic in some respects.
Well, it's also very theoretical, for sure.
Yes,
and
very
subjective.
Much so.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I will reiterate. I don't mean to come across. If I'm coming across hostile, that is not my intention. This is something that is very close to my personal, not really beliefs, but just experiences. And it is something that I've spent a lot of my life researching, simply because I go through it. So, like, it's just something that I've kind of have a lot of bias towards, and I know that sometimes that might come across as hostile. So, Justin, this is me being completely transparent. I'm not meaning to sound like I'm, attacking or anything like that by any means.
Oh. Well, then just disregard the DM I just sent you.
Explicitive? Explicit side of FFC
If that could get lost, that would be great. No, I'm just kidding.
If that could get lost.
No, I didn't take it that way at all, Blue. You're just super knowledgeable about this, so you have very informed opinions on the matter, and yeah,
right. But
yeah,
I also want to reiterate too that they are opinions. Like, I mean,
mm-hmm.
I don't mean to make it. I don't mean anyone to feel like I'm belittling that because they might disagree with me. No, actually, yeah. I want to have a conversation, and that's one of the best. That's one of the things I love about this group and our chat in general. And I've said that tons of times, is that we all have different opinions, we all have different experiences. Mm-hmm. I apparently don't have an internet connection right now. Apparently,
everybody got kicked.
Also though, it's worth noting. That just with what we've been talking about for like the last 30 minutes, it's like working with Quicksilver. Like this is like the most slippery of topics ever, because I love dealing in things that are ones or zeros, that I can point to a thing and I can say this is a fact and I can say this, but so much of this is subjective. So no, I didn't take any of that way, Blue.
Okay.
I really actually enjoyed. I enjoyed your point of view and have found it very informative.
Real quick, Beard, before I let you, dancing in chat actually brings up a really good point. Also, in reality, is individuals on the spectrum of autism, who do have emotions, but they are not visible. They're not. They're sorry. Let me. It's not that they're not visible. It's that we don't perceive them as responses that we would understand. So like their emotional response is different, and that perception is missed by most people.
well, it's, for lack of better way to put it, it's foreign to
Right, yeah.
how we would natively pick
translation.
up on it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what I was going to point out, the idea and concept of AI is so interesting because realistically, here we are as human beings in a way creating life. I'm going to quote, I think the best part about the new Alien stuff that's coming out, both Prometheus and Covenant, is the android life form of David. And I love how they put everything together with him. And by the way, Michael Fassbender, you are amazing with all of that. If you ever happen to watch this, oh my god! Anyway, so the there are a few, like Nathan Fillion and Michael Fassbender. Anyway, his acting is incredible. Just with the way that he portrays David, and then and then how quickly he can switch between Walter and David, and how different both of those characters are is exceptional. And it gives this interesting and provocative look at two different takes of AI. Walter, if you guys aren't familiar with like Alien Covenant, by the way, or Prometheus, getting past some of the horror aspects and whatnot, it is so worth it just to, if you're like an AI buff like I am, to look into how both of those characters are put together. It is amazing.
Prometheus wasn't a lot of horror, if I remember.
No.
There was a few awkward scenes, but it was,
I can think of one in particular.
Right? Yeah, no, that's the one
cutting
that, like,
into things. Anyway,
yeah, that's a scene that you should probably just skip. But like that wasn't. Yeah. But I wouldn't classify even that scene as horror. I haven't seen Covenant yet, but
it was very slasher horror, like Alien usually is.
Okay.
But Covenant takes on a different, and if you haven't seen Covenant, I highly recommend you do.
Yeah, it's on my list of things.
Oh my god!
After Chappie, apparently,
I've actually
keeps yelling at me about it.
I got Covenant when work actually had it on sale for $7.
Nice.
I absolutely feel like I robbed them for what that movie was like. Excellent movie, excellent portrayal of everything, but I am getting so far off topic. It is amazing. This idea, though, with the opening scene of Covenant, and I don't feel like I'm spoiling much because it's the very opening. You have David that is born, and you have Wayland that is standing by, like listening to David, talking about David, etc. And he is effectively saying, like, well, what do you see? And you start to hear David just kind of talking about, well, I see a piano, and I can kind of tell you, and I can also tell you what type of piano that is. I see art, but I'm going to tell you what that art is. He has these program responses that kind of build. The entire thing builds up into this, the whole climax of the discussion basically is like, well, if you created me, who created you and why? Mm-hmm. And that's the entire discussion, of course, of how Prometheus and the new Alien stuff is kind of going, is like, well, who is it that created the xenomorphs? What is it that created this entire idea? And why do they exist in the first place? Because they seem like they're terrifying individuals or alien life forms that exist, but who created them? What created them? And then this comes back to even the android level. And Walter, later on in the film, points out that, well, your model was destroyed, David, and was basically wiped out for the sake that you were too emotional. You had too much of an emotional response to everything. And you see this with the way that he is built up and acts. And I think that this pertains to everything in terms of like what we're talking about, because again, like we as humans have the ability that we are now creating a different form of life. And for us, that is another meaning, another page possibly in understanding that next step of how we were possibly created or what created us. And we feel that this is a way we can connect with our creator. And that's again kind of like the emotional and emotional, philosophical, and even spiritual response to the way that AI is basically like put together. One reason I love the way I didn't read the whole comment, but just I love how exos are formed, and this thought that maybe not every exo is made as a war machine, is made for different purpose. Maybe it isn't just a human consciousness that's stuffed inside of a frame. Maybe it is a machine consciousness that exists as well. And again, it's just this mind-blowing idea that we are creating a form of life to try to understand what drives us in a different sense altogether. And I feel like that was one of my biggest tangents ever, but carry on.
I'm staying silent because the comment about creating life and the potential tangent for exos is just
amazing.
It's a siren song that's singing to me, Beard. It's a siren song.
Should we do an episode on that sometime?
I don't.
Another poll topic, because I have a feeling that could be a 2-hour episode.
I don't have enough time in an episode to put it on YouTube to be like, I cannot justify anything right now in terms of talking about exos and consciousness without losing my friggin' mind. It just would not happen. No, it wouldn't happen. It would be a 2-hour video. It would just be me rambling. That would be all it would be.
That's why you have us.
That's why you have us.
I want to go to there.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that would I have especially with some of the new stuff with speaking of exos, with the connections that we're starting to see with possibly them and the Vex, which have been a mild topic of conversation over the last several years now, has kind of formulated to more of this this headway with what we're seeing with scans on Nessus. I love some of these connections that are starting to pop up. And then you start talking about the AI consciousness or build of how the Vex would act besides. Like, how far do we constitute them as AI? What kind of AI? Again, going back to the idea of alien, who created them? This whole idea stems from the idea of and at least the way that Bungie like creates their machina forms out to be. They are given life. They have life, and they have emotion to a degree. Or do they, like the Vex? There's these different levels that exist, like we basically contemplated and talked about with different levels of AI as a whole form. And Bungie does a very good job of like tailoring all of those together, of wrapping them all together. And you have the Exo integrating with the Vex, where the Exo are like straight, almost near one. Almost like I just noticed Justin's name.
Justin's
name
change.
Ivan, God. Because I was like, wait, I'm usually first one in the list. What happened here? But like
I
the
that
Exos.
Change it, bitch.
Oh no! Don't do it. But like the Exo, a highly emotional system that exists in terms of artificial intelligence. If we classify them as such, Blue will say yes, I will say no. It just in terms of the way that they handle interfacing with a non-emotional system like the Vex. And what can the Vex learn from that? They don't understand paracausality. Do they understand humor? Do they understand feelings? Can they understand feelings?
It just depends on if they
Vex
have a
is a whole-
positronic brain or not.
Right. That's, yeah. What's that data? Calm down. Look, lore. I don't need to hear this.
God, the reason why is and this is something Green knows I complain about all the time is Banshee's gift. Banshee's gift in the dawning. I'm sorry, but I'm so perturbed by this because you're literally creating artificial memories for him specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, and I'm just, to me, I'm just like, okay, we're seeing a lot, and this may just be me being kind of overreactive about it, but this is now like the third or fourth time that we've seen something actually get its memory wiped in the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm starting to feel like that's not just
You want to know my honest opinion? I don't think that the lore people, the writers, had any say in what Banshee's gift was going to be.
Right, and Banshee's gift, I'm like, but my problem is, it's like, if it was just that's fine. But like, I mean, we have an adventure where Ghost gets his memory completely wiped. We have a DLC where not only does Ghost not remember anything, but he literally gets possessed by another ghost.
Which is hilarious.
I mean, yes. Like, ultimately, in the big scheme of things, absolutely love it. Like, I loved having Segura as our ghost for the DLC, simply because it was just the voice acting was amazing. And
it was different.
It was different, right? But I guess my point is that up until now, the axiom has been, this is a ghost, and we know that it's kind of an AI, but so far it's been directly connected to the traveler, and so it's kind of been above things like this. And now in Destiny 2, we have gotten new information, which is completely fine. I'm going to clarify that. I am completely okay with it, but my brain is doing flip-flops because basically the assumed facts are being shifted, which that's okay. That's great that we're getting that clarification, but that does have tremendous effects and ripples down the stream from those changes, because now we know a Warmind can affect the memory files of our ghost. That's kind of a big problem.
Don't get me started on that.
Right. No, I mean, but I mean, that's kind of, and then even bigger. So this connects back to the Osiris connection. So we have Osiris, who has slander from Destiny 1 from the Concordat about being resurrected and artificial memories, and Osiris himself asking about, do ghosts facilitate memories, and all this stuff going on. And then in the Dawning, one of the gifts that we give one of the major vendors is artificially created memories that affect him and make him happy. Like, we actually change his knowledge of his existence, which is exactly a nod back to one of Osiris's primary questions of, are we artificially given these memories to make us more compliant to the orders of the Traveler and ultimately the Speaker and all these other things?
Or is Banshee such a tragic, broken entity that,
I mean, he
is. Memories might be the kindest gift he ever received.
Okay, right. And I'm not arguing that point at all.
You can argue the ethics. You can argue the ethics of the act, but the reasoning seems fairly plausible.
The reasoning seems perfectly plausible. I'm saying the impact of the ability to do that.
Yes, but I think that helps show that there is things that can change. There are things that can change. The ghosts are not infallible.
Right.
The ghosts can be modified. Exos are not necessarily uncorruptible in any way. And if you can think of it as a corruption, it's them taking the next step to say that, yes, things can be shifted, can be changed, which does call into question a lot of what's going on in the grimoire, in our histories, in a lot of things. But that's the same thing with any kind of reprogramming or corruption. The lies can be put in place. It just takes a freaking campaign of lies to replace a typical thought in society. It's the same thing. It's a reprogramming. And yes, it's frustrating, but I think it is an incredibly natural way for the game to go.
Oh, and again, I agree with that statement. I'm just my brain is doing flip-flops because of the ripples that requires us as
just
More
it lends
people?
it lends some credence to Osiris's little quip about, how much of your memories are yours,
Right.
and how many were, put there.
I'm starting to feel like a lot of them in character were. I mean, because the other problem is like, who created the bullet that we give Banshee? Right? Because if we're creating artificial memories for an exo, is that something? Yeah, I'm just going to stop. Because there's a lot of issues with that, because
We're just going to keep going with
we're
this.
We need
just
to do an
gonna
exo episode.
stop.
That's what
We're
we
doing
need
an
to do.
exo episode is what we're gonna
Yeah,
need to do.
man.
Because this is like, so many small issues.
And I would still say, like, we are treading on. I'm going to bring it up again. We are treading on like Nier Automata territory so much. And
Are we?
it-
I haven't played any of those, so
It does. And Nier Automata specifically, there are some, if you will, reset points that exist within the original Nier, but Automata just takes them to the nth degree. And I don't mean to like bring it up for the sake that it's a different video game. I bring it up for the sake that it ties back so much to exactly what we're talking about to prove a point so well that I think it does it almost too well.
Yeah. No. If I get to talk about Halo every episode, game you want for
Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, Greed. I know Greed kind of was like, hey, we should all have a final word from each other about the dangers of AI.
About what the dangers are.
Because we will totally, I mean, if you don't know this about us, we can go forever. But especially about
I've been told
this.
that about my
So I guess the upgraded Ivan.
I was talking about lore.
Mm-hmm.
AI.
Did you change your voice at all? Like, did you like deepen it? Is that just you?
No, that's
Leaning
just
back away from the.
it's how I talk.
Oh, all right.
When I took on this moniker that is A Ivan,
Justin has a monocle.
no moniker. Read a book. Read a book. Read.
You are the butler's eyepiece. Congratulations.
Yes. Okay, so you want to know what I think the dangers of AI are. So I think the main danger of AI is that we're so terribly flawed and broken that AI is better than we are. and it's the Ultron argument. Is there anything wrong with Ultron, or is he just the most reasonable one in the room? Because if you just step back and look at humankind, sometimes you can really point your finger to some things that are, really unacceptable. And so that I think that's the main danger of AI, is when AI branches out to the point to where it starts to question its maker. And there's specific times where at least examples in fiction where it's hard to root against the robots sometimes. I guess is the big danger for me, is that we get kind of usurped as the highest level of intelligence.
That's a fair point. Beard, what about you? What is your final word on the dangers of AI within Destiny?
I mean, do I need anything else except Terminator? Wait, that's not Destiny. Anyway, I think the overalls with really the overalls within like Destiny as a whole would simply be that, like, if we turned everything over at a critical point that we're at right now, where our civilization could immediately be like wiped out in an instant, if we started to trust AI as a whole, that would end up, I think, at least in an overall kind of solidify our downfall, only because our abilities as guardians especially are paracausal. They don't follow any logical overall feeling behind them. They are, if you will, a little bit more emotional behind most everything else. And in that respect, I think if we were to turn over any kind of decision making that we have to a more logical entity, that would end up spelling a bit of doom for us in the end. I don't think I'm summing it up as well as I'd like to, but it's just a matter that we need to be careful of what it is that we actually do trust. Granted, I guess that's Destiny as a whole. So anyway,
good job, Tevis. Rasputin's not an ally. Hear me, blood.
Look, don't remind me of characters that actually need to be in the game, please.
Tevis is so green.
Mine kind of goes back to our little tirade earlier about emotions and whatnot with that. I think the biggest danger in Destiny specifically is the language barrier between us and the AIs. We're going to assume they have an emotional response, which is something that I think Justin brought up really early on in the episode. And so by assuming that, we're going to try to predict things that they do and predict wrong and probably piss them off in the meantime, even though they can't have an emotional response or logic. Anyway, I think it's going to be a lost in translation type thing, personally. Blue?
I just want to take a chance and apologize for the empathy tangent that we had and most of the psychological tangents that we had.
You know what? I empathize with you.
Oh, you would. I knew that's what you were going to say already. You're too predictable now. You are a predictable AI, Ivan. You got to fix that.
Listen, if you would like me to be more erratic, I could take on a SIVA component.
Look, that would only be possible behind the actual code that you have with SIVA, okay? You fail on that one, too. Try again. And no, I'm not unhinging you. You can't handle the truth. What?
I don't know what to do.
I
Mommy and Daddy are fighting.
Wait. Beard.
Yo.
Your mommy, right? I just want to make sure we get the right hierarchy.
Well, I mean, I am the more emotional one in the room. What? Hang on.
Oh man! All right. Well, we're gonna run through an outro, and then we'll probably be around for a little bit of an after show.
Yeah.
With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Links to all our other sites can also be found with our episode archives over on the new FocusFireChat.com. Please be sure to email us at focusfirechat@gmail.com with any questions or comments for our team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. Also, be sure to check out all of our amazing podcast partners within the Guardian Radio Network over on theguardiansofdestiny.com. So until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.